Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we are listening to Crime Beat. This is the big lie to die for.
Tonight, we explore how one lie winds up destroying an entire family.
We begin with breaking news this hour out of Scarborough. What you're looking at is a quiet residential street that's turned into the scene of a triple murder.
He said, call 911. My brother's bleeding in the driveway. Make sure the police come. Make sure the police come.
The only thought in his mind was, I've got to try to save my brother. It was this chilling exchange. And then he responded, there are two more in the garage. I think the most startling discovery was the number of victims we had, and that a crossbow was used. He took these steps to plan it out. It shows a thoughtful individual. He couldn't risk losing it all. He'd rather kill than tell the truth. This is something that will stay with me forever.
Now, the big lie to die for.
The weather that day was oppressively hot. I recall that the humidity and the heat was so thick that you can actually feel it as you take your step from my vehicle. It was a very nice neighborhood to be walking into.
Lawndale Road is one of those picturesque Middle Scarborough neighborhoods with beautiful manicured lawns. The news media never covers it because nothing really ever happens there. And then all of a sudden, this happens.
Well, 1 o'clock, I was sitting by my computer in the front room. There was a banging on the door. Somebody's really pounding on it. I opened the door, and this gentleman almost fell on me. So I sort of carried him half into the living room, and he fell down on the floor. He said, call 911. My brother's bleeding in the driveway. Make sure the police come. Make sure the police come.
August 25th, 2016, I received a call from our duty desk as I was the number one on-call team for the homicide squad. The information was rather brief, but my understanding that it was involving stabbing that occurred.
Took a look at the gentleman in the driveway. Boy, it's just covered in blood. So I came back and I said to my wife, give me a towel and I'll take it over. So she gave me a towel. And I figured if I saw blood spurting out, maybe I would be able to stop the bleeding. But there was too much blood, I couldn't see. We know the mother that's on. My wife was supposed to go to the exhibition with her yesterday, and she canceled because she had a cold. Maybe it cost her her life.
Now, the house had a standalone garage, and the driveway from the street led directly into the garage area. As I'm walking through or walking down the driveway, I see this lifeless body.
When the first responders arrived at the scene, there was a bleeding young man in the driveway.
And I know there were attempts made to revive this individual. However, they were unsuccessful.
And there was a man standing very close by, covered in blood. And the police officer asked him if he needed help. And the man replied, no, it's not my blood. And there was this chilling exchange. And then he responded, there are two more in the garage.
My recollection of the actual garage was that it was not kept well. I sensed that it was used more for storage than for a motor vehicle. There was like piles of wood, piles of flooring. It was at this time, as I entered the garage, I noticed the lifeless bodies of two individuals. But as you got closer, I noticed that there was the body of a woman on the bottom of a stack, if I can call it that, and on top there was a male. It was just almost like the stacks of wood that were piled in there. This individual had stacked these two people, one on top of the other.
We are very, very early into the investigation. We have a lot of work to do.
In my mind, with this many deceased folks, I was thinking this potentially could be a mass casualty situation.
This street will be cordoned off for several hours. I would ask that the people who reside in the neighborhood to be patient.
No, I'm not concerned for my safety, but there's a kid's school up here and a kid's school down here. Yeah, it's disturbing. Very disturbing. I have two young kids. My daughter was born last week. My son starts school next week, so just to have them right next door is pretty scary.
I told the wife we had to put the house on lockdown and the shed, the back's on lockdown, and make sure that no one's running around the properties.
I lived here for 21 years, and I'm very shocked, right? To know that now that's not just guns, but now it's crossbows that we have to defend ourselves off with.
I think the most startling discovery was the number of victims we had and that a crossbow was used.
We discovered a crossbow weapon in the garage. The main reason why people would use a crossbow is because they're easily accessible. You can enter any type of sports store and purchase one. They're also very effective and lethal, and they're very quiet. It's essentially you load and fire and point it in the direction that you want the bolt and arrow to go.
I can say in my time there, that's the only time I've ever seen a crossbow used as a weapon.
It was going through my mind that the offender that's responsible for these homicides could have essentially been responsible for more folks that we have not located yet.
We begin with breaking news this hour out of Scarborough. What you're looking at is a quiet residential street that's turned into the scene of a triple murder. The weapon involved appears to be a crossbow. And just minutes ago, this story took another stunning turn. There is a link, according to police, to a suspicious package found on Queens Quay downtown.
Coming up, what police discover when they enter that downtown condominium. A crossbow attack in Toronto's Scarborough neighborhood has turned into a triple murder investigation. Now there's a connection to a suspicious package found downtown. We now return to the big lie to die for.
Triple murder in Scarborough is connected to a suspicious package found at a Queens Quay condo. So, Mark, what more can you tell us?
Well, Farah, the actual address where that suspicious package was apparently found by Toronto police and being investigated is 218 Queens Quay. The police got the call to come here about an hour and a half after that initial call in Scarborough.
Their worry was, is there more than one crime scene?
They locked down the building and basically evacuated.
At this point, I'd received some information regarding an apartment.
An announcement was made over the PA. Police also went door to door to aid people in getting out of here.
Our investigation determined that the occupant of that condo was Kristen Baxter.
We were unable to get contact or get a hold of her. As a result, we went to check on her well-being in the apartment.
I received information that was very troubling.
Investigating a suspicious package, but that seems to be the only information we were able to get from police.
And when they went into the apartment, there wasn't anyone there, but there was a number of machines set up that caused the officers concern. And when they saw them, they thought they might be bombs.
The tower was evacuated at about 2:30 in the afternoon, leaving residents out in the rain. Police will only describe what they were investigating as a suspicious package, and residents were simply told to get out over a PA system and through door knocks.
Told us we just need to evacuate the building, so we all evacuated the building immediately, and we haven't heard anything else from anybody in the building, the cops, security, nobody's on anything.
bomb or a device?
I'm not going to discuss what was found at the scene other than to say there is a link between our scene here and the one down on Queens Quay. The first device was a laptop computer. It was propped up against the wall with dumbbells. And the way that it was propped up, there was an oscillating fan with a wooden spoon taped to line up with the enter button. So every time that oscillating fan would turn, the wooden spoon would hit the enter button and it would play the next video clip. The second alibi device had his cell phone. I believe it was an iPhone propped up. And in the iPad and in the cell phone, there was a pre-typed message. And again, much like the first alibi device, he had two oscillating fans that were connected to timers and stylus pens attached to the isolating fans, lining up with the send or enter button on the corresponding device. Both of the devices were essentially created by the offender to create essentially a digital footprint and provide an alibi. And if he was ever questioned by the police, he would be able to say that he was in fact at home using his cell phone, using his iPad, and watching YouTube on his computer.
We begin with new details in one of the most shocking crimes in Toronto history.
A publication ban has been lifted in the case now that allows us to report the names of the victims. And it turns out the accused killer and the dead knew each other, and they are all members of the same family.
We discovered that Kristen Baxter resided at that condominium with her fiance, Brett Ryan. And we also discovered that the dwelling that I initially attended was that of Brett Ryan's mother, Susan Ryan. At this point, we've identified three victims in this homicide. The woman that we saw earlier, I described earlier, was Susan Ryan. Her eldest son, Chris Ryan. Both these two individuals were located in the garage. And their youngest son, or Susan's youngest son, was AJ. We also learned that there was the death of Brett's father about a year before, in 2015, where he died of some medical condition. However, there was still one other family member that we had not located or identified, and that was Leland Ryan.
What do we know about Leland Ryan? Leland Ryan was in his late 30s at the time. He was a second-year photography student at Ryerson University. He was living at home with his mother, along with his youngest brother, AJ, who was in his late 20s.
When we spoke to Leland Ryan, he described that during the 25th of August 2016, he said that he was in his house and never really thought much about it. He had not seen his mother at that time, but he never really thought much about his brother being there. It would not be unusual for Brett to attend the home to either clean out the garage or do a couple other handy details around the home.
A short time later, he sees Chris. He asks Chris what he was doing there, and Chris informed him he was there to pick up Brett. It seemed normal. There was nothing out of the ordinary at that point in the day. Now, his brother Chris lives at a different address.
Right, so he wasn't part of the plan originally.
Chris wasn't supposed to be there.
He went back to his room when he heard a very blood-curdling sound coming from outside of his dwelling.
Leland's upstairs, as he usually was, on his computer in the second story of the home, when he hears a piercing scream. And he rushes down the stairs and he discovers his brother laying near the garage. AJ's laying, bleeding profusely, with Brett standing over him. And he rushes to him and he says, "We've got to call 911. And Brett's reacting rather strangely.
Leland had asked him, "Hey, what are you doing here?" And initially Leland believed that AJ had hurt himself somehow.
He can tell that he's got severe injuries and he's bleeding and that he needs medical assistance. The only thought in his mind was, I've got to try to save my brother.
And Brett is discouraging him from calling 911.
Leland tried to call 911, but Brett knocked the cell phone out of his hands. Then he administered a chokehold on Leland, and they got into a vicious battle.
And he thought that Brett was going to choke him out and ultimately kill him.
Coming up, Leland fights for his life and struggles to understand why his brother would want to hurt his own family. Leland Ryan has just discovered his younger brother AJ bleeding to death in the family's driveway. Now his brother Brett has Leland in a chokehold. We now return to the big lie to die for. Brett was choking Leland, and Leland was able to grab an object and hit Brett with it and was able to escape.
And makes his way running across from his address and runs across the street to a friend of the family's and someone he knows. And when he arrives, he's observed to be bleeding himself, and he literally vomits and then actually collapses in the foyer of the neighbor's home.
About 1 o'clock, I was sitting by my computer in the front room. There was a banging on the door. Somebody's really pounding on it. I opened the door, and this gentleman almost fell on me. So I sort of carried him half into the living room, and he fell down on the floor. He said, "Call 911. My brother's bleeding in the driveway. Make sure the police come. Make sure the police come."
The police arrive, and the police find Brett Ryan at the front steps of the residence. He's covered in blood, and after the police caution Brett, he says to them, "I should have driven him," referring to AJ, "to the hospital." According to the police, Brett then stated, he, being Leland, is okay, we just fought. And then the guys, referring to Susan Ryan and Christopher Ryan, in the garage are dead, crossbow to the head. It's me. I'm admitting to everything.
The cause of death of the woman found in the standalone garage was ligature strangulation. The cause of death of the man found in the standalone garage was crossbow bolt stab wound to the neck. The cause of death of the man located on the driveway was a single arrow's head stab wound to the neck.
The causes of death for the three deceased persons were as follows. Susan Ryan was strangulation using a yellow rope.
During the confrontation with his mother, Brett stabbed his mother through the face with a crossbow bolt.
For Christopher Ryan, he was murdered using the crossbow. The crossbow entry point was from the back of his head and exited through the front of his head.
Chris was in the garage with Brett, and I believe while Chris was either tending to his mother's injuries or examining the injuries that his mother had, Brett shot Chris in the back of the head with the crossbow. He then took Chris's body and put it again either on top or beside Mom's body and covered both with a tarp.
And AJ, according to the restatement of fact, was murdered using stabbing to the neck area.
He confronts AJ around the side of the house and proceeds to stab AJ numerous times with a crossbow bolt. The blood gurgling sounds that AJ was making caught the attention of Leland Ryan, who had come down to make some coffee.
Debris is still scattered across the driveway a day after 3 people were murdered here, left to die in the garage and outside.
We're also learning more about one of the victims, Christopher, an employee with the TTC for the last 12 years, is described as a gentle soul who made friends easily. Comments of condolences posted to social media.
I've heard nothing but positive things about him, though, and everybody who knew him speaks of him fondly. So it is indeed a sad day for all of us here at the TTC.
The TTC lowering flags to half-mast in his memory. Neighbors say they would often see 66-year-old Susan Ryan working in her garden.
I think her garden used to be the nicest ones on the street, in terms of flowers and the landscape. I met Bill and Susan the day they moved in. I was outside in the backyard and I introduced myself and I said to them, welcome to the neighborhood.
Bill was a really cool guy, really nice guy, like normal working blue collar guy. Went to work, come home, be with his family. Chris Ryan, one of their sons, the eldest, again, he was just like his dad, very quiet, very soft spoken. I believe we shared a shop class together. I think it was machine shop we did together. Leland I never really saw too much of. Very rare I'd see him.
In the younger side, he wasn't talkative at all. He wasn't really that friendly, but he would say hi, and that's about it. But no conversations at all.
AJ, I never really saw too much of either. He'd be outside maybe riding his bike or whatever. He was a lot younger. He was the youngest of them all.
He mostly helped his dad with renovations.
The only thing I thought that was like cool is that just 4 boys. Like that. I thought that was like, that's a pretty big family, right? 4 kids and 4 boys to boot. So I was thinking the mom's got, probably had her hands full there.
Out of the 3 of the boys, they all were described to be introverts, except for Brett Ryan.
Brett really stuck out, to tell you the truth, out of them all. Brett really stuck out because he was a really outgoing guy.
Yeah, and he was attracted mostly to my car. He liked the car because it was totally different. It was a different type of car. And I used to put it in shows, so he would always say, "Oh, I love that car, Mr. Baby." It was a Cadillac, a 79 Cadillac that I got all done up. 10 speakers in it.
Brett and I would have all kinds of conversations, like, maybe talk about girlfriends. From what I remember, he was a student painter. I'd see him outside all the time. He'd be loading up the truck, maybe ladders, putting paint in, tools, material. And we'd strike up small conversation. I remember asking him what was he doing, school and stuff. And I remember he told me he's going to university.
So I said to him, Brett, I said, I hope you learn well at school. You do very well because you have to make your parents proud. I want to make your parents proud and steer the trouble. Don't get any trouble. And his response to me was, Mr. Bailey, I'm sure going to do that. Thanks for telling me that, and I'm going to do that. But one evening I came home from work, and just as I go to turn in the street, because my house is the second house from the end of the street, I saw there were police cars in my driveway, in front of the driveway, and there were a lot of police down the side of the house. So I said, what's going on here?
Coming up, Brett Ryan's criminal past is revealed, along with the events leading up to that fateful day in August, and the secret that Brett would kill to protect. The family next door never would have guessed what their neighbor's son Brett was up to until the SWAT team showed up one day. Now back to the big lie to die for.
The suspect known as the Fake Beard Bandit has been arrested. Brett Ryan appeared at Old City Hall Court today, charged with robbery and wearing a disguise. In each robbery, it's alleged the 27-year-old wore a fake beard, placing a note to a teller stating he had a gun and demanded cash.
Mr. Ryan was known as the Bearded Bandit. He wore beards and wigs and would go into banks, and he did 8 robberies over a span of 8 months.
He would use a Gilligan outfit, often would make himself appear to be older, and shuffle as if he had some difficulty walking.
This is a powerful individual. He had his arm in a sling, and his robberies, he would hand a note to the teller indicating that he had a gun in the sling. And as a matter of fact, a few of them were very close to where he was living. They had been living in the Rouge Hill area on Conference Boulevard from 1998 to 2010. It was only fortuitous that in one of the robberies, I believe his license plate on the getaway car that he was using, I believe was identified by a witness. They had him under 24-hour surveillance for 2 weeks. And so he would go to banks and stake it out. The last bank he went to stake it out. He had his note on. He was fully prepared to do the robbery. And for some reason at the doorstep going into the bank, he looked. And I think there was some construction in the area, and there was quite a lineup in the bank. I think he was afraid he probably wouldn't get away. Nobody knows for sure why he abandoned the plan, but as he was stepping out of the bank, hold-up squad officers grabbed him.
When I found out about Brett being the bearded bandit, I believe I saw it on the news. I was totally shocked. I was shocked because he was such a nice guy, like a normal guy. It wasn't like there was nothing, no aggression about him, nothing.
I couldn't believe, he was such a quiet kid, and very respectable, well spoken, and he was a good looking boy also. So I thought he had everything going for him, that he wouldn't need to get involved in anything like that.
I can always remember my dad telling me, Brett had bought a brand new, I think it was a F-150 pickup truck. And I remember my dad asking me, wow, this guy was making good money, doing the painting jobs, and apparently he liked expensive things.
My understanding is he was committing the bank robberies to fund a lifestyle that he simply couldn't afford. He ended up receiving a 5-year sentence. He had done some pre-trial custody for which he was given credit and ended up serving another, I believe, 3 years or so in the penitentiary.
The ordeal of everything happening at the house, I think, and everybody knowing that they live there, I think he just wanted to get away from that stigma, and he just decided to move out of the neighborhood and kind of start out fresh where nobody knows you, right?
They moved in the spring of 2010 to Lawndale Road, which is in the Markham, Eglinton, Kingston Road area.
And our Global News team did some investigating today, and we've learned that the accused, Brett Ryan, was just weeks away from getting married. This wedding website has now been taken down, but it showed the couple was set to walk down the aisle next month at a golf course near Hamilton. The site featured pictures of the seemingly happy couple smiling together and even offered hotel recommendations for guests.
Brett Ryan met Kristen Baxter sometime around 2011. He was introduced to her through a blind date through some friends of theirs.
He was still on parole at the time he met his fiancée.
Shortly after they started dating, Brett Ryan had admitted to Kristen that he was on parole, and that he admitted that for an 8-month period of time between 2007 and 2008, he had committed bank robberies. The family were all supportive of his relationship with Kristen, and they really saw him as being someone who was a good example of someone who had made a mistake and is now recovering and trying to make a better life for himself and the people around him. However, we know that this all turned out to be nothing but a lie. Kristen believed that he completed his university program and was contracted for several months to work at this IT company and would work from home. She had no reason to disbelieve him, although she expressed some concern that she had not met any of his friends or his co-workers.
Shortly after he got the job, he was fired. His employer found out he was the bearded bandit.
In addition to the lie about the job, Brett had also told Kristen that he had graduated from university when in fact he had dropped out and hadn't graduated.
So the whole time, he was pretending he was going to school and then pretending that he had a job.
exactly.
But 1 month before the incident occurring, Brett had met with his mother and disclosed to her that he was not working and that essentially he was basically taking her money.
He confessed to his mother because he required greater financial support. I mean, the fiance believes he's being paid by the IT company. So she probably is going to say, well, Brett, where's the money? Why aren't you contributing more to supporting this condo and our lifestyle? And he realizes, I need a financial bridge. So he went to his mother for that financial bridge.
So it was at that point Susan Ryan had given Brett Ryan an ultimatum and said that either you disclose all of this to your fiance, Kristen, or she would.
We learned that the murders were as a result of him wanting to silence his family and keep a secret from others.
What did Kristen say about the morning of August 25th? What does she remember about that 24 hours before that day?
So Kristen didn't distinguish that day from any other day. She left early as she normally does, sometime around 6 o'clock. The last time she saw Brett was that he was laying in bed before she went to the office. At the same time, she also noticed that an incident that had occurred on or a news report on the TV, and noticed that the dwelling that the camera was focused on was the address of her fiance's mother.
The fiance receives a really disturbing email from Brett Ryan, and it said, I'm so sorry. I've destroyed everything and everyone. I've been hiding a terrible secret. My antisocial personality disorder. I couldn't control it. I wish I could make it make sense. I can tell you more when I see you. She texts Brett Ryan's best man. His name is Brett Davis. And she says, hey, Diddy, did you hear anything from Brett? I received a really strange email from him, and it's freaking me out. I'm really scared.
So Mr. Ryan described antisocial personality disorder as not being aware of other people's emotions. He didn't have fear or anxiety, and he wasn't able to recognize the emotions himself.
When he served his time in prison for the bank robberies, do we know if he received any counseling or any help for any disorders he may have had?
He received counseling while he was in prison and was available to him when he was on parole, but he discontinued it.
I didn't see any professional reports or anything to confirm the diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder. Here's somebody who has just murdered his mother, murdered his brother, murdered another brother, and tried to kill his last brother, yet has the wherewithal to be calm when the police arrive, to get on the phone, log into his email account, and send his fiancée this message.
Coming up, did officials miss the warning signs after Brett's first jail sentence? Brett Ryan stole $28,000 as the bearded bandit bank robber, but he'd served his time and was trying to start fresh. So when he lied to his fiancée about quitting university and losing his job, his mother urged him to come clean, giving him an ultimatum that ultimately cost her her life. Now, back to the conclusion of The Big Lie to Die For.
Let's start
with those charges, 3 counts of first-degree murder. That suggests that police believe this crime was premeditated. In court, he appeared calm but tired. Dressed in a white jumpsuit, he nodded in response to his lawyer, appearing unperturbed. Outside, his lawyer, G.J. Partington, did not want to comment, going to some lengths to dodge the media.
When you look at the steps that he took as the bearded bandit and, procuring high quality, certainly better quality than a ski mask disguises, and then you look at the steps that he took as the crossbow killer and what he did in terms of waiting for Kristen to go to work in the morning to set up the alibi devices. He exited the building in a way that he wasn't going to be captured on camera. He wore 2 pairs of pants. That tells me that, at some point he anticipated there might be blood. And what better way to make good your escape if you just take off the top layer? The weapon that was chosen, I believe he bought it used off of one of the platforms online, probably paid cash for it. So again, there's no tracing. Placed the crossbow in the garage. Again, this wasn't a scenario where he got into a confrontation with mom and happened to grab a kitchen knife that was sitting there. He took these steps to plan it out.
As we look at the trajectory of his life, when he was granted parole years earlier, were there any warning signs at all?
I don't believe that there were warning signs. When he was granted parole, he seemed like a man dedicated to rehabilitating his life. There was really no sign that he was capable of the violence he inflicted. But at the same time, before he was the bearded bandit, no one had any idea that he would ever, because he had financial difficulties, would resort to becoming a serial bank robber. That was shocking to the people around him, to his neighbors, to his family, all of them.
People we spoke to all spoke highly of Mr. Ryan. They trusted him. They said he was dependable and he could be relied upon. His mother even used him as the executor to her will.
It sort of brings chills down your spine when you think that here's a person who was trusted by his mother, his family, but it ultimately turned out to be the person who murdered his mother and destroyed the family. I can only imagine how devastated Leland is and how tortured he is over what happened. And, that ultimately informed the guilty plea that Mr. Ryan, Brett Ryan, entered into. To his credit, from the beginning, he retained Mr. Rosen, who is excellent defense counsel, one of the best there is when it comes to murders.
I remember meeting with him at the detention center. He was appropriately nervous and concerned, but at the same time focused, pleasant to deal with. The question is, why do people do this? This had everything to do with, I believe, with the protection of his existing life and the fact that it was going to crumble again as it had before. Some people are strong enough to say, well, if that's the way it happens and that's the end of the relationship, so be it. And some people resort to this sort of behavior, unfortunately. Yes, he attributes it to some mental issues that he has. Now, some people would say, well, that shows how manipulative he is. But he didn't run away, and he stood his ground, and he waited for the police.
But how would that plan actually work? Well, he was supposed to have a bachelor party in Mount Tremblant the day after the murders. Was he really going to go to his bachelor party when his whole family was murdered? Was he really going to marry Kristen with the blood of all of his family members on his hands? even if he somehow could have escaped this.
Well, the so-called crossbow killer has been sentenced to prison for at least 25 years. Brett Ryan pleaded guilty to killing his mother and two brothers and attempting to murder his third brother. He has been sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 25 years.
From my perspective, the object was to avoid multiple convictions for first-degree murder.
So the deal was that they did not seek concurrent parole and eligibility periods, because if they'd done that, then they could have looked at 75 years of parole and eligibility. It was 3 counts of murder with stacked parole and eligibility periods, which was in law at that time. But the Crown and defense made a deal to keep it to 1 count of first and 25 years.
The best solution for the client was to work out an arrangement with the prosecution that would avoid a trial. It would save everybody a lot of time, money, and heartache for everyone concerned. It was a very sad case.
Just as he had done when he pleaded guilty as the Bearded Bandit, swore that he was sorry for what he did and the harm he did. He made an apology in court. Justice John McMahon said that Brett Ryan was the author of his own misfortune by creating this web of lies, and then he enacted a homicidal plot to try to conceal those lies. But he also suffered because of those murders and the guilt, because he has destroyed his own family. And the judge believed he was truly remorseful for what he did. But he's also the guy who created this tragedy. He couldn't risk losing it all. He'd rather kill than tell the truth.
But ultimately, he did lose it all.
Ultimately, he did lose it all. He lost his whole family. He lost his freedom. Lost everything.
So we reached out to Brett Ryan for an interview. He declined to speak to us. Well, what do we know about the status of his case?
Brett Ryan is currently serving a life sentence.
So the earliest he could get out is when he's 60.
I mean, he could get day parole a couple of years earlier. Mm-hmm. The average for a first-degree murderer is 33 years. That's how long it takes for them, on average, to get parole. He's eligible in 25 years.
It's a tragedy, right? Like, a beautiful family, great people, and, to think, there's only one child left out of everybody, it's unbelievable.
There's nothing. No warning signs came from him at all. I didn't see any. I know he loved his father. He loves his father dearly. They all did. So I'm thinking if the death of his father, along with other problems he had, triggered his behavior, that caused him to snap or whatever and behave the way he did, he was probably reaching out for help. And he didn't get the help and the guidance he needed. Even if he'd come back here, and talk to me, I would have guided him in another direction other than the direction he took.
This is a crime that didn't just victimize 4 individuals. Brett Ryan, his life will never be the same. Kristen Baxter's life will never be the same.
As far as I know, she has broken it off with Brett Ryan, and they're not together anymore.
What do we know about Leland today? How is he doing?
In his victim impact statement, he said, "I bear no animosity towards Brett Ryan," which is an incredible act of forgiveness. But on the other hand, he says, he admitted he's afraid of him. He doesn't want to be around him. So he's, this experience is so isolating for Leland Ryan.
Prior to my retirement, I had reached out to him because I truly felt, he needed the support, and this individual had lost his entire family, and now, he's left with nothing else. And I just can't, it's just something that will stay with me forever.
A triple murder truly beyond comprehension. A family destroyed by one's own family member. Brett Ryan's currently serving a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. I'm Anthony Robart.